Oh. T'es prêt?
Ok, c'est bon, vas-y.
Very good morning from Geneva and London, two very rainy cities this morning, and good day to all of you wherever you are in any time zone around the planet. My name is Carlos Grau. I am the Director General of the Global Express Association, a trade association that represents the three leading express delivery carriers, DHL, FedEx, and UPS. And it's my pleasure today to be the moderator and also a speaker in this session. Let me warn you that this is not your usual panel, but rather a policy session, one that also has a somewhat convoluted title, Simplifying Revenue Collection on Small Parcel Trade. What I would like to do today is present in some degree of detail a proposal that our industry, the express delivery industry, has come up with, which we think would facilitate cross-border e-commerce, particularly by small traders, by micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And it would do that by making it simple to collect taxes and duties and to calculate them on the small, low-value parcels that such traders tend to ship. I hope that by the end of the session, I will have convinced you of the merits and benefits that such policies could generate if a group of countries adopted them. And what we're trying to do is to get a debate started, first here in Geneva, at the World Trade Organization, in what's called the Joint Statement Initiative talks on e-commerce. Our members' business is to carry goods and documents from one doorstep on the planet to literally anywhere else on the planet, and do that very safely and very fast. They serve businesses of all sizes, from small family businesses to the largest multinational corporations, and increasingly, they are providing logistics for cross-border e-commerce. Now, I don't need to tell you that e-commerce is a game changer. It allows the smallest corporation, the smallest trader, to become a global exporter. But does it? Many import rules, as we will see during the presentation, are designed for what we could call traditional trade. Large corporations sending large shipments and being able to comply with complex rules at the border, in particular regarding duties and taxes. I have said that this is not a panel, but fear not, I'm not the only speaker this morning. Policy proposals, such as the one we're presenting, need to address real problems. And this one certainly intends to. So to keep us real today, to link this proposal to real issues on the market, I am delighted that Rupa Ganguly has accepted our invitation to be with us from rainy London. If this was television, we would call this a duplex. Rupa is the founder and the CEO of an e-tailer called Inclusive Trade. She also has worn two hats. So she used to be a bit of a policy wonk in an earlier life. So she does not feel completely ill at ease amongst us this morning. But again, the reason she's here is to give us, for starters, a reality check about cross-border e-commerce. So Rupa, welcome. I'm delighted to see you. Thanks for accepting our invitation. And please do tell us about inclusive trade, about your business model, and about the issues you face when shipping in your inventory across borders. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Carlos, and good morning, everyone, from indeed a very rainy London. And I must apologize if you hear terrible noise from my roof, because it is actually raining cats and dogs. we hope we can actually get on without having too much disturbance. Carlos, once again, thank you very much. And it's an absolute pleasure and honor to be on this panel with you. I think one of the key issues that we deal with every single day as an e-commerce platform and community is indeed getting our products to our consumers and getting our products from our suppliers often. So in that sense, what I'm here to do is really just present a little bit about what we do and why what Carlos is actually about to talk about makes sense to us, and what in it perhaps might have a specific interest in terms of making actual life easy for the MSMEs or the micro businesses that we deal with. We ourselves are a small business. We're a team of 5, but we have global trade. And we work with about seven countries at the moment, and we ship to about 10. So in that sense, there's a lot of crossover and loads of different trade policy rules that come into play, including agreements. But at the same time, we do face issues at borders quite often. So let me just take you through a few little things that we do and why e-commerce today is relevant in actually making a massive difference to the MSMEs. So what we like to call ourselves is, indeed, we use technology or online digital trade as our channel, as our tool. But what we're all about really is about making ethical shopping simple. Okay, so we want to ensure that if you want to be sustainable as a consumer, you want to buy something that actually shows visibility and a transparent supply chain, and you would want to have a positive impact. We want it to be simple for you. And in doing that, we're doing our part. We're actually doing our part in ensuring that we can connect these amazing artisan brands from around the world who created positive change with you. So with that, I'll take you through the next couple of minutes, giving you a couple of examples of what we actually do and how it's actually relevant. So what's our role? So this lovely lady you see over there in the picture smiling away, she's in Guatemala. And this is an amazing 3-generation-led cotton farm. And what they do is they actually grow organic cotton, but this is naturally colored cotton, and this is natural brown cotton. So it's amazing in a sense that there are these unique products and unique elements of the supply chain that exist around the world, which I'm sure you and I would love to see as a finished product, either in your cushions or in your the garments you wear or the chairs you sit on. There's so many different ways in which this could be used, but it makes it even more special that it has such a big impact on the lives of the community that trades over 3 generations. Now, going forward, how do we actually measure impact? And what we've done is to make it as simple as possible. There are loads of different measurement tools out there. There's so much out there that, one might even say there's a bit of an ethical minefield, if you like, to sort of simplify life. And I think that's going to be my core sort of theme. Simplicity is really critical, I think, for all of us in this rather complex world today. And we've chosen to go by the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and use that as our guiding factor in terms of measuring impact and assessing what kind of producers, buyers would actually be able to sell on our platform, and who do we engage with. And in doing that, we've selected 3 different areas. That's SDG 5, 12, and 13. Primarily because it makes a massive difference to the textiles and fashion industry that we work within. And these 3 particular areas are what we can see and actually see the impact that we're having on an everyday basis. Hopefully, we'll be able to move forward and, have an impact on some of the other areas as well. So let me give you again an example. When I say we work with SDG 5, 12, and 13, what does that actually mean to you? Oops, there we go. So this is Seble, and she's an artist in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And she is really an amazing artist. She does this gorgeous work. She creates, she paints, and she creates these paintings out of a little studio in Addis Ababa. Now, her interest was in seeing how could she get this amazing work out to you out there, her art and her products, which in fact, one of which, is a beautiful scarf that we call Scarves That Speak, because it has a QR code that takes you back to her story. But it is in fact a hand-rolled, beautiful, gorgeous scarf. Now, all of this is great, but at the end of the day, we actually would love to bring it to you, whether you're sitting in the United States or Europe or Asia or parts of Africa. We want to be able to bring her story and her actual product. And what that does is, in fact, you wear the product, you live the story, you're able to see all of it online as you go along. But at the end of the day, this is making a massive difference to her life, because obviously she's able to then go to the next step in the next project and create more and sell more, hopefully. Social impact. Let me give you an example of when I say responsible responsible production and consumption. And you will see that I say responsible production and consumption. And this is why SDG 12 is so critical. And cross-border trade really does make this happen, because this is a lovely story. And I'm actually wearing some earrings from there. I don't quite know where you can see it online. But Eden not only makes gorgeous jewelry, and honestly, they're all beautiful, pink quartz and amethysts and all of that. But at the same time, what it does is it's making a huge difference to the lives of all these women across 5 countries of Asia. And they rescue, restore, and actually provide livelihoods to women who've been trafficked. So this is not just a beautiful piece of accessory or jewelry that you can, show off or love and wear, but in fact, it's making a big difference to their lives. And the transparency of it, A, makes it really special because you can see the impact. And B, wearing it, you're actually a part of that amazing chain of impact, if you like, globally. So again, but for that to happen, it's got to come to you no matter where you are in the world. So hopefully, the next slide again, going forward, will show you a little bit more about, again, supply chains. What I'm talking about here is a gorgeous factory. Again, I've picked from one of our favorite products, actually. It's called Haspe Maya Moderno, the brand, and it's been set up by 2 women. So in fact, what this is all about is that they collaborated with a local factory who was using waste. When you make a pair of jeans, for example, there's a lot of rubbish that comes out, as in, offcuts. And what they started doing is collecting that to create raw material for production. And they had a textile factory which came down again 3 generations, in fact. So there's lovely Ariana over there in the factory, where she's taken over from her father and previously from that her grandfather. And what they're doing is that they're spinning back this yarn, making it back into spinning back this raw material, making it into yarn, and then creating fabric. So you see the lovely top worn by the model on the left. She's actually worn a top with a panel of old Haspe traditional hand-woven vintage fabric that's been sourced locally. And the background, or the backing, is in fact recycled denim yarn. So the T-shirt that she's wearing with that lovely panel is made entirely, if you like, it's upcycled. Okay. Now, these gorgeous products are wonderful to get across borders, but with it comes, all the lovely design innovations and things we have, there are some issues. I'll give you a small example. You can see the middle over there, that lovely product, which looks a bit like a scarf and a top that the lady in the middle is wearing. And we did face a slight issue there at one point when it was trying to cross borders over here. And that, whether it was a scarf or whether it was a top, because in fact, it is a very innovative product, and you can, in fact, wear it in a couple of different ways. And does it classify as a scarf? Does it classify as a top? Or a blouse? Of course, we could classify it as women's wear blouse, but then the base is in fact is knit, so it goes into chapter 61. However, the part that's the scarf is actually a woven vintage fabric, and that's chapter 62. So in a sense, there was a bit of confusion as to how we should classify this product. But eventually, we were able to have some discussions with border customs authorities to be able to get some clarity on what would be the right classification and how we would get it. But of course, that reduces, it slows down things, right? Because we were stopped and we weren't quite sure. And definitely she wasn't sure, shipping from Guatemala, how she was going to go forward. So that actually brings me to the point. I mean, I could go on about inclusive trade, and we have so many gorgeous products. But I suppose I wanted to bring up the issues that, as much as we do all the good that we're trying to do, and actually we love it, we cherish it, there are issues beyond our control that really slows down our growth, the impact that these small brands have, and of course, the ability for you to have gorgeous products. So first and foremost, the thing that I said about classification, it is a bit complicated, and we do need simplicity. And I think, the whole issue of trying to fill up these forms for a small, medium, or micro supplier across the world to send it across to another part of the world is complicated. And while there are portals it still is a little bit focused on slightly larger businesses. And quite honestly, while we're all trying to support micro enterprises, it still isn't really a product for micro enterprises. So I think that is something that I see as a gap, as and an opportunity to simplify and to make it really easy for small businesses to survive. The second part of it, which of course I'm sure I can't be the only one. I'm sure you've been in a position where you might have received something, and suddenly, about a couple of days later, you've received a horrible, enormous invoice from the customs saying, I'm sorry now, you need to pay the duty for this particular product. And honestly, when someone's trying to send a present across, or if someone has bought something, and then you have this nasty bill that you get, I mean, none of us like those invoices that come through our doors, and definitely not, especially when it's a present. And I do have an example of a time when I had a very simple product sent to me, and then about a month later, I had a bill of £95. So you almost wonder, what on earth was it actually valued at? Because you can't just bill me £95 for a very simple product, which was quite honestly just pieces of garment. I mean, it couldn't have been £95 of customs duties for something as simple as that. So in that sense, it's again boils down to a lot about classification and predictability, really, because if on my portal there was a way in which we could show absolutely all the costs involved, and we could just, the customer knew, and you could make a decision, then you have an informed decision. Of course, you may like or not like the price you see, but the point is that at least you have it all in front of you and it's predictable, right? You know that this is what I'm going to pay. And I think that predictability with online sales especially is really, really, really important. And we still aren't quite there with it, I think. And finally, I suppose the third point, I mean, there are loads of points, but these are the three, let's say, crucial or critical things that I find we face quite often in our cross-border issues, is the ease of access. Simple things like, for example, a bag. If you're trying to sell a tote bag, which is a simple cotton, a little bag across borders, which is beautifully hand printed and all of that, and you want to keep it because you want to be environmentally friendly and all of that, but then it gets classified as a leather bag because, of course, leather bags have a different value. We've seen these issues as well, and it might seem very simple on a platform which focuses on trade experts and trade professionals. But quite honestly, SMEs and micro businesses are not made up of trade professionals. We're talking about simple you and me customers and suppliers. So the ease of access, being able to know that I can actually sell across borders and I know exactly what I'm doing, what form I'm filling. If it was online, we're anyway selling online, that would be brilliant. At this point in time, there's a slight lack of interconnectivity, if you like, and one system doesn't talk to the other. And if you were just able to put it all together on one platform, I think it would make life a lot simpler. I don't quite know whether that's possible or politically even agreeable, but at the end of the day, if we want to see more flow of trade across borders and you really tangibly want to see SMEs and MSMEs grow, I think we have got to think out of the box. So I think those are a few points that I made. And of course, I'm more than happy to kind of come in and answer or provide more inputs on what we do, how we do it. But Carlos, if that's just sort of an introductory thing to kind of give you some idea of the challenges we face, and of course, the absolute need that we have for simplicity, predictability, and ease of access. So I think with that, I'm going to hand over back to you, Carlos. Hopefully, I've painted a simple picture of what the life of an SME and a micro business online looks like. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rupa. That was really, really excellent. And I told our viewers that you would keep us real, and you have. And you've painted a very clear picture of the issues small traders face today. Our proposal, which has this long technical title, addresses just that. And I think you might like what we're going to suggest. Whether it's politically feasible, it doesn't depend on us, but we hope it certainly should be, because it addresses precisely the issues you've mentioned. Moving on to the technical part of the presentation, the policy part of the presentation. We are launching today a policy proposal on duty and tax collection on low-value shipments. One of the issues you were talking about, but that's the technical title. Now, if we go into plain English, what we're trying to do is to make it easy for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to export through e-commerce, and efficient for governments to collect revenue on those imported small parcels, whether it's tax or duty or both. And we propose to do that through simplification and automation. This is a proposal that emanates from the Global Express Association. As I explained at the beginning, this association represents the three leading express delivery carriers, DHL, FedEx, and UPS, who've spent collectively a lot of time thinking about that and putting together the proposal that you are about to see. So, the first issue is exactly what you were describing, Rupa. Today, the situation is represented roughly in this diagram. You have, in many countries, a de minimis threshold. We'll come to that in a second. But for all shipments above that threshold, you have a set of complex rules designed for traditional shipments. And these rules designed for traditional large shipments are applied to small, low-value ones, such as the ones you and your purveyors ship. For you, if you're five, and you said you're not trade experts in this area, clearly micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises lack the expertise to comply with such complex rules for traditional shipments. So in many cases, that might have the perverse effect of deterring them from exporting at a time when e-commerce should make it particularly easy for them to go global by providing a showcase on the whole world. You know, through the internet, which we're using today, they can show the products to the whole world. Now, can they export them easily? That's the other question. So by deterring this kind of trade through complex rules, there's less trade, and as a consequence, there's a revenue leakage. There's a loss of the potential revenue that governments could make in taxes and duties when these products come into the market. Now, I said I was going to refer to de minimis thresholds. This presentation is not about de minimis thresholds, but nonetheless, we need to talk about them to explain what they are. The de minimis threshold is a value threshold which is used as an efficiency tool, or at least it should be used as an efficiency tool. The idea is that there's a certain value under which the cost for a government to collect and calculate duties and taxes on the shipment exceeds the revenue they collect on that shipment. So if you insist on collecting revenue on those shipments, you are losing money, or if you want put otherwise, the taxpayers in your country are subsidizing that import. So if that level matches the cost of collection per shipment in a country, then bingo, you have reached an efficiency level. We're not advocating their elimination. If a country has these de minimis thresholds, they are an efficiency tool, they should be kept. However, this proposal we're putting forward today is not about de minimis. It's not about not collecting taxes. It's not about not collecting duties. It is about making it easy for governments to make that money. The proposal is to establish a band between two value thresholds. The de minimis I've mentioned, under which it makes no sense to collect taxes and duties because the revenue you collect is below the cost of collecting it. But then the upper threshold is what the World Customs Organization calls an informal entry threshold. An informal entry threshold is another value threshold for the shipment, which determines that under that value, because it's not a very expensive, not a high value shipment, you could simplify all the information that customs needs to process that shipment. So you need, if you're paper-based, which we do not recommend, you need fewer pieces of paper, you need fewer data fields. It's a simpler procedure. What we're suggesting is that countries, if they have an informal value threshold, review it and set it at a commercially meaningful level. And if you don't have it, think about introducing one. And then our proposal to simplify the collection of revenue stands between those two thresholds. We're purposefully not giving a number. We're not saying it's so many dollars for de minimis, it's so many dollars for informal entry. That's for each country to determine depending on the particular situation, what the cost of collection might be, what they see as the vast majority of imports through small parcel trade, etc. And it's in this yellow band between the two thresholds I've mentioned that a simplified collection mechanism should be put in place. How have we come up with a proposal? Well, we have spent quite some time examining the best worldwide practice, and I dare say the not so best ones as well, the existing models that governments use to collect revenue on small parcels, and we've subjected them to a triple simplification test. And the question is, does this model make it easier for governments to collect revenue, for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to export, and, if you will, selfishly, for carriers to bring them across the border? And the result of this long analysis is a proposal which is essentially one system with a number of common elements for simplicity's sake, but also 3 options for implementation to bring a degree of flexibility to governments. So it's not one size fits all. There are 3 options that I will talk about in a minute, and they are not perfect alternatives. They are designed to adapt to the local reality, to the circumstances of every particular country. So, what are the common elements? The 2 of them I've already mentioned. They are a commercially meaningful informal entry threshold, and below that, a de minimis threshold that at least matches the collection cost per shipment. And in that yellow band, you would then have a series of principles. Let me see if I can change the slide. A series of principles defining the method. Why are we talking about a series of principles? Because first, we want to use the WTO as a first stop. And the WTO is not into nitty-gritty customs or tax regulation. They set trade policy principles. So the defining principles of the method we are advocating are, first, low cost. Should be very easy to operate, simple to implement for all the players in the value chain, the government, the shipper, the carrier, and so on. It should aim to achieve no discrimination between foreign and domestic vendors. That's not always possible, but the aim in the long run should be to go there. And at least if there's a gap, it should be narrowed to the extent possible. Thirdly, and most importantly, ideally, it should be an off-the-border collection system. So you don't pay every time you cross the border at the border. Your duties or taxes are calculated and the shipment isn't freed until those duties and taxes have been calculated and paid to the authorities. The border formalities in this model should focus on health, on security, and on safety, but not on calculating the duties, not on paying the duties or the taxes. This can be done off the border. It's much more efficient. The other element, one is simplicity, the other element is automation. Now, let me say this at the beginning, this is not a technological solution that we're proposing. This is not about buying a sophisticated computer program or system and plugging it in and bingo, you're in business. What we want to start first and foremost is a discussion on simplification. And then the technology would support this concept, but the concept is paramount. And in automation, you refer to this, Rupa, having connectivity between the systems. Well, that's part of what we're proposing. If you simplify your tax and duty structure and you put it online for all to see, then a small piece of software called an advanced programming interface, or API for short, which is kind of a messenger between two computers, could plug that that official electronic tax and duty information emanating from the destination country's government and bring it to your system, to your computer, and plug it in at the point of sale, with two main benefits that you refer to. The first one is that it allows the vendor at origin, you, to figure out what the destination, duty, tax, or both are, and so there are no surprises for you. The buyer at the destination country also gets what we call a landed cost. So no envelope 10 days later with £95 additional duty because someone calculated a duty for something extremely expensive. No surprises. That brings the predictability for both ends and also for the government, because if this is automated and the government puts in place a simplified and efficient collection process, this can be remitted very, very simply, either immediately or periodically. I talked about three options. Again, the idea here is to bring flexibility to the concept. It's not one size fits all. It's not, this is what you need to do. We're trying not to be prescriptive. We're trying to come up with a concept for a thorough policy discussion in international trade, tax, and customs circles. These options, again, are not perfect alternatives. It's not pick one. They are designed to adapt to the situation, the particular situation that each country may have, whether it's a developing country or a developed country, the level of sophistication of their tax codes, of their customs policies. The idea is that these common elements, the simplicity and the automation, translate into three options. And you will see that they have all these common elements while being slightly different. The first one, and arguably the simplest one, is to replace all taxes and duties collected at the border by one flat rate. And once again, everything you see here emanates from things governments out there are already doing today. So we're not thinking in a lab wearing white coats, what would be ideal? No. We've extracted this from examples we see out there. We operate in 220 countries and territories. We send parcels across 220 borders every day. So we've extracted that from our daily experience. So first idea, flat rate. Again, we're not giving any figures, but here's just for example's sake, say it's 15%. Importantly, the rate has to be reasonable. It cannot be a barrier to trade. It cannot put off foreign traders from importing. So remember, one of the principles we were advocating is to eliminate the discrimination between foreign and local vendors to the extent possible, or at least narrow the gap significantly. This should narrow the gap significantly. So suppose it's 15%. All you do is make this available, ideally electronically, and then Rupa sends a scarf worth, say, $20 to this country. The Rupa's IT system, through the API, picks up the flat rate at destination. It's 15%. So the end price that the buyer sees is $23, 20 plus 15%. The seller, Rupa in this case, says, oh, okay, I will collect $3 for the government of X. And through the system that the government puts in place, she remits that ideally periodically. Why periodically? It's just to simplify bureaucracy, every month or every quarter. The same way it's done for local vendors. If they remit taxes every quarter, do it quarterly. If they do it monthly, do it monthly. But again, here are the benefits: predictability, landed cost for the buyer, predictability about tax collection for the government, and the seller sees exactly what the tax is on what he or she is sending over. The second option is more sophisticated, and I need to spend some time explaining it. This is based on an experience that Canada has put in place since 2012, and I will delve into that in the next slide. But it's about simplifying duty collection. Many governments out there might still rely on duties as a main source of income, or for trade policy reasons, they want to impose duties on imports, even on low-value imports. The idea here, and I will refer to Rupa's blouse cum scarf example, is to simplify the classification to the max. Remember, we're talking about low-value shipments, which are probably a few tens of dollars. Why make it horrendously complicated for small traders to hit the right harmonized, the harmonized system code, the HS code, and have to haggle with customs and border authorities eternally about whether Rupa's piece of garment is a scarf, is a blouse, it's both, it's knitted, it's woven, it's made of cotton, it's made of artificial fiber, it's a mix. That is a nightmare. And as Rupa was saying, in small and medium-sized enterprises, they're not trade experts, they're not customs experts. So what you do here is you group the headings. First you define the typical headings of products that are coming through e-commerce, in this case, into your country. And you will see what the Canadian list looks like in a minute. And then you group them into so-called buckets or groups of headings. In this case, textiles would be the top one, and you attach one or two rates to that group. And you also attach a dummy harmonized system code to that code, to that group of items. So Rupa's garment is a textile. We will not discuss whether it's, again, woven, knitted, artificial fiber, natural fiber, for men, for women, a scarf, a blouse. It's a textile. All textiles go into the first bucket. Suppose here that Rupa's garment is $30 and the rate is 20% for such imports. Again, send the API to the government website or server where this information is stored electronically. You've made this simplified duty structure available for traders out there. And the API tells Rupa system, hey, it's textile, it's bucket number one, it's 20%. So you calculate immediately 20% of 30 is 6. The buyer sees that the garment will cost him or her $36 and decides whether to buy or not. No envelopes come afterwards with, hey, yours $6. And Rupa sees that she owes $6 to the government of X, and again, it's remitted through a mechanism that the government has put in place. Let me go into a little bit more detail now to explain where this comes from. Again, all examples come from real-world policies that are being applied today. It's nothing new here. And these are policies that work. So Canada in 2012 started this system that they had been thinking about for 2 years. The discussion started with industry in 2010. And as you can see, they have all these headings. They're based on typical items that travelers came back with. So this is the system for when you come back to the airport and you have to declare something. This was the typical set of headings that was applied. And then they grouped them into 3 buckets. Now, in our proposal, we don't care whether a country groups them into 2 or 4 or 6 buckets. Not 34, please, but something along those lines. You put, depending on your trade policy, the items under a specific bucket. Like Canada, for instance, under bucket 1 has all textiles: bedding, linen, towels, curtains, clothing, apparel, except for some reason religious and saris, footwear, parts of footwear, including skates, and generally textiles. So again, to Rupa's example, it's very easy to classify. You don't need to be a customs broker. You don't need to be an expert in the HS code system. You don't need to be trained. You don't need a license. It's very simple. What you're sending is a textile, it's a garment. It's not religious, it's not a sari, therefore it goes onto bucket 1. Now, Canada, you will see, has 2 columns. One is an FTA rate, which is 0 across the board for countries that have a free trade agreement with Canada. And for those who don't, most favored nation, in this case, it would be 20%. If Rupa was selling a handbag, well, handbags are under bucket number 2. And in this case, even if it's a leather handbag, for whatever reason, it pays a cheaper rate. These rates, I must say, are an average of the rates that are typically applied to the items on each bucket. So they look at the headings, they look at the rate that would apply, they calculate a weighted average, and that's what you get. So very, very simple system. Third option, arguably also a sophisticated one, but in the long run, we believe that this is the one that achieves perfect elimination of any discrimination between local and based on what Australia and now New Zealand too are doing. Australia started this as a pilot a couple of years ago, and I must say it's an extremely successful program. And they thought a bit out of the box by saying, okay, we have GST in Australia. How can we make sure that foreign vendors pay GST in Australia? By simplifying it tremendously. This is a system that would apply to any country that wishes to impose consumer taxes on low-value shipments. Whether it's VAT or GST or a sales tax, it doesn't matter. It's the same logic. What is your GST rate? Put it online. You have several ones. Simplify that, make it available online. The vendor sees that through the API, it's plugged into the IT system. And again, same logic. The buyer gets a landed cost. The vendor sees how much is owed, collects that tax for the government of the country, and remits it periodically to that country. In Australia's case, it's exactly the same periodicity as for local retail shops. So this system, again, is perhaps the one that eliminates the discrimination perfectly, but again, it's not for everyone. So 3 systems for flexibility, 3 systems constructed along the same principles of simplicity and automation, and 3 systems based on successful examples of policies that governments are applying today out there. None of this is theoretical. The next steps, we believe that the adoption of such policies by a critical mass of countries, such as perhaps the 84 that are discussing e-commerce in the WTO in Geneva, would do wonders for e-commerce. Now, let me be very clear about one thing. This policy does not apply to e-commerce alone. It applies to low-value shipments. It's very difficult to determine whether one parcel that crosses the border is the result of an online operation or someone calling the vendor or writing through a mailing order. The parcel is the same thing. It contains the same thing. It has the same value. So we're not designing this only for e-commerce sales. We're designing this for all parcels in that value threshold, in between those 2 value thresholds that we described at the beginning. The 3 benefits would be, first of all, an increase in MSME exports. I think this would make Rupa's life a lot easier if these countries adopted such policies. For the countries themselves, who are now facing what they call a tsunami of small parcels and cannot process them because they use traditional methods to calculate, collect, and determine the taxes and duties on those shipments. It makes life easier, and it makes the capture of the revenue, of the taxes, of the duties, much more efficient. And in the end, this supports economic development on both ends by increasing trade and by allowing governments to make more revenue. Next steps policy-wide, I mentioned we want to start a policy debate here in Geneva at the World Trade Organization. There's this group of 84 countries called the Joint Statement Initiative on E-commerce. They're talking about mostly digital issues, but we'd like them to take a look at trade in goods through e-commerce. It's for the WTO to set the policy, the direction. So in the proposal, there's a detailed proposal which you can download from our website. We have typical trade treaty language for them to consider. But of course, this also takes more detailed policies, and that's why we will be talking to the World Customs Organization. Perhaps they could come up with a standardized list of items for the so-called 3-bucket model. And we will also be talking to the OECD in Paris, because they are the world's experts on taxation. And in fact, they've already issued a couple of policy papers on exactly this, how to collect consumer taxes from low-value shipments and from vendors that happen not to be in your jurisdiction. Now, this concludes the presentation. We want to open the floor to questions from the audience, you can do so either by raising your hand or by sending it online to the moderator, who will pass it on to us. Thank you so very much for your attention this morning, and please shoot any questions. Both Rupa and I will be very, very happy to answer. Thank you. I'm having trouble displaying the chat here. We don't have any questions yet. Come on, don't be shy. Or maybe, Rupa, this was so clear that we've convinced absolutely everyone. That would be grand.
Actually, Carlos, can I just, not ask necessarily, but just sort of maybe ask for a clarification on something?
Of course.
So for example, in this case, on our platform, just as an example, we have traders from different parts of the world, right? And they would be sending parcels across to various parts of the world. So with the model that you mentioned, well, of course, let's say that it depends on which tier of the model. There are 3 different possibilities here. But in either way, in terms of the visibility of the duty or the kind of revenue, if you like, that's going to be applied on their product. For that, would they need to actually classify their product in a certain way, or how do you see that working? You talked about buckets, right? So how would those buckets actually work? I mean, you mentioned it's a Canadian model. I'd love to know a little bit more about how it simplifies the life of my my vendor or my brand supplying from, let's say, somewhere in Africa to somewhere in the US.
Okay. First of all, if we're talking about the second option, which is duty collection, it would make it easier, because today you have 5,400 harmonized system codes. And in many countries, you are asked to hit specifically the right one. And then customs might disagree with you. I mean, in the case of your garment, they might say, no, for us, this is not a blouse, this is a scarf or a hoodie or whatever. And suppose in that country that different HS code carries a slight difference in duty, say it's 2% more for argument's sake, you would be haggling over 2% of $20 or $30. And you go, what's the benefit? Is it not much better to have volumes come through and collect a duty that's the average of those? So in this case, the destination country, I'd rather use Canada than the United States, because it's a living example, has decided to group all textiles into bucket 1. You don't have to be a customs broker and trained in HS code systems to determine whether that is HS code 12345 or 12346 or 2378. It's the HS code that is associated with bucket number 1, which is mentioned in the example, and that's the real HS code that Canada applies to all textile imports under $500, no matter what they are. So there you go. You're sending a textile to Canada. It's under $500 in this case, Canadian. Just classify as dummy code, whatever is in the first bucket. And if you have an automated system with an API, the system can do it for you. So your computer system picks up the information from the Canadian server, plugs it into your point of sale, and it's done. And then you determine what part of it is your price, what part of it is the duty that you owe the Canadian authorities, and you look at the way that the Canadian government has put up in place, which honestly, I don't know how it's done, but I know that in Australia, for instance, it's that easy. Maybe they give you a bank account and you just have to give a tax registration number, and you send those duties every month to the Canadian authorities, as the case may be, and you comply. So this has also a benefit, because if it goes fully electronic, it's traceable. So in this case, the Canadian authorities can see whether Rupa is paying duty on her imports. And if not, well, it's up to them to decide what to do. But they can see it. It can be very transparent.
Carlos and Rupa, there's actually a question on the chat from Manchen Yu, which is regarding how can the governments verify the exact value of a product?
Okay, here, it's a very good question. And that is something that I'm sure haunts the likes of Rupa every day. There is a subtlety in our proposal, which makes it a lot easier. And this subtlety is that we don't declare a value. When you do it today in the traditional systems, you declare a certain value and then customs believes you or doesn't, and they check it, and there's methods. In fact, there's rules on how to check that value. And the first one is transaction value. Well, here, guess what? It's a function of the price. If it's fully automated, the system does it for you. We're not declaring a value. It's a function of the price at which it was sold. So if the system is automated, it takes away any incentive to cheat on value because it's based on the price. It's based on what the consumer is paying. And that takes away any valuation problems which you might face. Otherwise, I'm sure Rupa can tell us a myriad nightmare stories about customs detaining a shipment because they didn't believe the value was what was declared. Here, you don't declare a value. You've paid a price. The duty and tax is calculated on the basis of that price, takes away the problem. Any other questions? Well, judging from the radio silence, it looks like we've been extremely clear in explaining this proposal. If you have any questions that come up to you in the next few days, there is a platform that Geneva Trade Week has put in place. And, hang on a second. One has just come in. And it says, this was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much, whoever that is. My early startup is actually endeavoring to build this API that you're talking about for SMEs piloting with our shipping company. You're right in that they are heavily burdened by how laborious international parcel shipping is. Our customers have hundreds of abandoned carts online because customers are shocked by shipping costs first. I'd like to understand what the timeline is for the implementation of this proposal. And secondly, is the Global Express Association open to partnering? This comes from Nicole Bestman. Thank you very much. Nicole, yes, it is a problem. Now, implementation, it doesn't depend on us. It depends on governments adopting these policies. And we've just launched that. I would say, if you think it's a good idea, call your local MP or your representative, if you have one in your country, to call the Trade Ministry and tell them to look into this proposal, because we want this discussion to start in Geneva. If governments accept that, well, it might take some time. I suppose trade policies measured in years rather than months, but this shouldn't be too complicated. And the benefits are, we believe, are tremendous. So we need people like you to help us support this, to create international support for such policies so that they are adopted. And the key is that a group of countries collectively do that, because as you very well know, trade is a two-way street. Everyone's focusing on how can we support our business exporting. Yeah, that's very good, but an export is an import somewhere else. So if you don't facilitate imports at the same time, exports are going to be very, very difficult. So the idea is for this critical mass of countries to simplify simultaneously imports by making tax and duty collection very, very simple. That's the trick, but it's not for us. Are we willing to partner? Of course we're willing to partner. We're partnering with Rupa today. But we need more supporters for this policy proposal. So anything you can do to help us will be absolutely welcome. And I hope I've answered your question. Any more questions? Antonio, can you see anyone raising their hands? I can't from here.
No, so far there's no one raising their hands, and on the chat, that was the last question from Nicole. But just as a reminder to everyone that they can raise their hand for questions, and then we can unmute you, and you can also post the questions on the chat, and I will forward them to the panelists.
Well, if not, I suppose we can bring this session to a close. Again, the proposal is posted on our website. It's a detailed proposal. Download it and see what you think, and continue the conversation on this Beyond Trade network, or approach us directly. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have about this trade policy. And as I was telling Nicole, we would very much welcome your support for it. That concludes our session. Rupa, any concluding thoughts from you?
Just wanted to say thanks very much. I would be very interested to see how this moves along. And of course, we'd be more than delighted to look at simplifying processes for ourselves, definitely, and for all our vendors. So thank you very much for the proposal, Carlos. I really do look forward to seeing how this moves along and how it's debated, discussed, and what comes out of it, because we're very keen to definitely be part of that solution. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Rupa. Thank you for taking time from running your business to be with us this morning. And thank you to all the participants. This concludes the session from both rainy London and rainy Geneva. And we look forward to any interaction with you on this through the platform or directly. Have a lovely day and a lovely weekend, everyone, and goodbye from Geneva.
Thank you. Bye-bye.